Howdy, folks. Happy Thursday. We had 4 games in the league last night.
What about Thursday? Seriously.
What's that?
You said happy Thursday, but what's so good about Thursday?
We're alive.
Okay. All right. Fine. Very low bar.
Okay. Howdy, folks. Happy shitty Thursday.
There we go.
There
That
you
was
go.
real.
Okay. We just got an R rating on our podcast and webcast. Thank you very much, Russ. Okay, I'm going to start with this just because, as somebody who is a concert goer, and I know we all are, one of the things that upsets us the most, if you remember, like the Paul McCartney concert in Buffalo a few years ago, the tickets went in about 3 seconds. Like say the tickets went on sale at 10 o'clock. At 10:01, it was sold out.
Yeah.
And it's because of these bots that the scalpers are using to buy up a block of tickets, and they're gone like that. So, and that is infuriating. Well, I don't know if this is a trend, but and everybody knows I'm a big Sarah McLachlan fan, and it's not like U2, but she has a pretty good following, and she sells out venues. Well, she's doing a tour this summer, and there was, like most bands, they have internet pre-sales through their website. Okay. Yeah, we saved the 2 degrees. Peter probably knows the girl who lives next to Sarah, but anyway.
Right.
But this is the great thing that they did. So they had an internet pre-sale, 10 a.m. on Tuesday. You go in, and now they have like sections for the different venues. I'm going to the one near Buffalo in Lewiston, New York, and you go in and they say, okay, what area do you want your tickets? Like the orchestra pit or the first section, and you get your number of tickets. You go in there, you get, like, say if you want 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever, and they give you the section. They don't give you the specific seats.
Really?
You got 5 tickets in section 101 in the first, say, 6 rows, but they don't give you the specific seats. Of course you have to go to the will call when you go to the show. You've got your voucher, you've got everything. But what this prevents is the secondary market. Right. They don't give you the seat for you to sell. Yeah. So for the internet pre-sale, it's for devoted fans or fans who want to go to see the show, and they won't know. It prevents the secondary market and prevents the bots.
Green Day did this for a show in Philly. What they did was, you bought tickets online. They had no designation, none, and it was $50 a ticket. Then you just waited online before the show, went inside, and first come, first serve, and that was fine. I thought that was fair too.
So, I'm a big concert guy, and I used to do mail order for Grateful Dead tickets, where you sent your postal money orders in and everything, and old school, and I've done that for a lot of things. The biggest problem with the ticketing industry is not that scalping's always existed. Sure. It's that the companies that have the monopoly on the ticket distribution and the buildings. I think one of the things that really gets overlooked is that buildings have agreements with the ticketing companies. Yeah. And there's more and more independents popping up now for certain things, which is a very good thing, because essentially Ticketmaster was a monopoly.
Yes.
And such. And it's starting to be challenged, and that's a good thing.
Ticketmaster.
Those agreements are what cripples everything, and it's Ticketmaster has not done enough to deal with bots and scalping. Right. It's really bad. Now I'm really lucky, because as a Jet season ticket holder, I have club seats, so I get a pre-sale because I have a seat license, and I get access to anything that happens in that building.
Nice.
But interesting enough, a lot of events and concerts, I put in for the tickets for those club seats. If I want my sale, they give me the limit I get. I don't know where my seats are until they arrive. Same thing.
Okay.
Which also, if you're going to give certain people pre access, and you're going to do this digital ticketing where you can sell tickets and do things, you got to look at us too. And I think it's totally fair.
Yeah.
And I saw Paul McCartney that way. I had great seats. I didn't know where they were until I literally got my tickets arrived, however they were digitally, a week before the concert. Yeah. And it was fantastic.
Yeah, and it was like with the show I'm going to, it was a tiered system because it like if it's further back, they were 50 some odd bucks, and if it was closer to the stage, it was like 65 or 70, and the orchestra pit where I'm going to be sitting, which is like 3 rows deep, is like $85, and I'm like probably the only concert I'm going to in the summer, so I may as well splurge. But I mean, it's like I have no problem. Like I know. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. It's great. You have no problem paying for it if you can get the tickets. Right.
Yeah, and that's the frustrating. I mean, and okay, I'm an old fogey, so this is not gonna, anybody who's watching this talking about, and we're talking about tickets. This is long ago. I mean, I've said it before. In the '80s, when I was in high school, Central Ticket Office downtown Buffalo, which was Harvey Weinstein, Harvey and Corky Productions. They used to sell the tickets at a central location on Delaware Avenue in the city of Buffalo, and they had somebody in a van behind the building distributing out pieces of paper with numbers, and you had to check off. And this is in the winter. I got tickets for Genesis. The tickets went on sale in January. It was 10 degrees outside, and you had to check in every hour. And if you didn't check in, you lost your place in line. I was out there for 10 hours. Yeah, and then they lined everybody up at 7 o'clock to get in there. And I only got tickets like in the second level, but that was the way they did it back then. Then it got better where like Ticketmaster outlets were at like Blockbuster Video or Movies Plus, which is a Blockbuster affiliate. You could go to any one. And I used to go to one in the suburbs where nobody was. And they opened the door 10 o'clock, you go in, and I would get front row or second row or third row every single time. And then, of course, they changed it. And now it's...
You know what? Camping out for concert tickets is a rite of passage, and kids these days have no, like, I can remember when Pink Floyd came back in '87 without Roger Waters, and I went down to the Vancouver Playhouse ticket office, and I left they went on sale Saturday morning. I left high school, came home, grabbed a sleeping bag and a backpack and a coat and like 4 cans of Coke and a chocolate bar. And I had a fistful of money from friends. No one went with me. And I laid out with hundreds of people. And luckily I was like 16, 17. And, these older guys took me under their wing. They made sure I was fed and stuff, and I learned that like, hey, okay, it was like Almost Famous. We got the young guy here. We can't let him get sewered on this. And I've always adopted that approach. Like, you got to pass that down. That's knowledge and respect, right?
They weren't as friendly in Buffalo. They almost let me die of hypothermia. So
I got a quickie thing, and then we'll get into the hockey. This could spill into the hockey world at some point. So when Bryce Harper had his initial press conference, he talked about Mike Trout, how they text with each other, and maybe Mike Trout would play for the Phillies because he's from Millville, New Jersey, which is about 20 minutes south from me. And so it's very close. Even though Derek Jeter is his favorite player of all time, everybody believes he wants to go back and play at home, which I don't know if I subscribe to that, but it's possible. Well, so then Tony La Russa went on ESPN and basically said that he was outraged, and this is, not a nice thing, disrespecting the Angels. But Tony La Russa works for the Boston Red Sox front office. So now that's sort of like a tampering thing because he's talking about these other guys, and he's not allowed to do it.
Well, apparently Rob Manfred came out yesterday and said, had some words about Harper's comments about Trout. They don't want baseball to be like the NBA, where you've got an Anthony Davis situation where, it's basically he's a lame duck in that city for another year, and he's going to end up being traded at pennies for the dollar because everybody knows that the first chance he gets, he's going to go to play for LA and LeBron. So they want to avoid this stuff. And honestly, I don't think it's good. I mean, if you're going to,
I think has 2 years left on his deal.
He's up after 2020. Yeah. So I think you're right. So, and the thing is though, I think he's going to be 29 or 30 at that point.
Doesn't matter. He's the best player in baseball.
I'm not saying he's not the best, but he is the best. But that was about the same age that Albert Pujols signed with Anaheim.
Sure. When a team signs him for that 8-year deal, I think he'll last a little longer than Pujols as far as being good because he hasn't had any major injuries. Where Pujols definitely had some scrapes along the way. Nothing major. But I felt like he just had a lot more mileage. I don't know why. Yeah. But I don't think he'll be as broken down as Pujols has been the last couple of years. But
Sure.
grant you, if he signs an 8-year deal, you're getting 5 good years.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that later on because I wanted to talk about how contracts in the NHL, and baseball. I think teams are more interested now in getting shorter and paying more for shorter deals than long-term deals. But we'll talk about that in a bit. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Thursday, March 7th, 2019.
I'm Peter Testier in Winnipeg.
I'm Russ Cohen. I'm just trying to really just take in this glorious Thursday that it is.
Okay. I'm Michael Agello, and this is HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. All right, let's talk about the games last night. Russ, we'll start with the one that you were at. I think if Eck was here, I'm sure he would come up with the glass half full for this. But I am ready to strike the death knell of the Philadelphia Flyers after they fall behind 5-0 and lose 5-3 to the Washington Capitals. Brian Elliott, as you were saying in our conversation on via text, he never has been good against the Caps.
No,
the Caps really schooled the Flyers early in the game and then held on. Even it was a good third period rally by the Flyers. They took out Elliott, brought in Cam Talbot, but now they're 7 points behind. It's over.
Yeah, you could ring the 3 bells. I would not have started Brian Elliott. I don't care if he was hot. I would have put Cam Talbot in simply because he's the bigger goalie. He hasn't played as much, and maybe Washington would have a little trouble solving him. Washington had no trouble solving Brian Elliott. Now, it wasn't all on him either. The defensive zone coverage was brutal.
Yep.
I mean, brutal. And you could say Philly was, a little under the gun without Jake Voracek and without who else were there? Oh, Nolan Patrick. Yeah. They were missing those two. Those are 2 big cogs, but nobody was missing on defense. And once again, they put Shane Gostisbehere now on the wing, and so they could have an extra defenseman in there. And the defensive zone coverage was horrible. The one bright spot for them, I think, Talbot was a bright spot because he only gave up 1 goal, I believe. Yeah. So he was a bright spot. He actually made some really great saves in that game. Some incredible saves, actually, now that I'm rewinding it in my head. But also the other thing was Philippe Myers played really well. I do want to slow the roll of Lord, who's saying now he's the next Mark Howe. Let's ease up on that. He only got his first NHL goal last night. But I appreciate when a player gets their first NHL goal. Like, that's something that doesn't get old with me. And I see Mark Howe all the time. If I told him that, he would laugh. He's in that building every game. Yes. So he would actually laugh at that. But not because Myers can't do it, just because it would
I mean, that is the statement of the ignorant. Do people realize that Mark Howe
was? I don't call him ignorant.
No. I'm sorry, but do people realize that Mark Howe was one of the best defensemen? I would say in the late 70s and 80s. He was phenomenal.
He was. But Myers does look good. His skating looks really good. He was a little bit of a force. He was one of the few. Even Provorov had some plays where there was no pushback to him. He sort of like gave that little bit of push and never really got a guy off the puck. Ovechkin was spectacular. Like, we forget how good a passer he could be. He laid out for a play.
Yeah, that Tom Wilson
impossible to reach.
That Tom Wilson goal was incredible.
It looked like it was impossible for him to reach that puck, and he somehow slid to it and then reached as far as he could go and made a pass on his knees. Like, it was
and Elliott bought in full on the shot. He thought there was no way that he was going to pass it.
Yeah. There was no way he could shoot it, though. Like, that's where something where Elliott's got to look at that and quickly in his mind realize there's no way he could shoot that from where he was.
Now, Peter, everybody thought that, at the All-Star break when the Capitals had lost 7 in a row, Stanley Cup hangover. I mean, real hangover for Ovechkin because look at all the vodka he drank during the summer and champagne. But after the All-Star break, they got back on track. They add Hagelin, who had a little bit of a wrestling match with Gostisbehere yesterday.
Yeah.
They add Jensen to their defense. Holtby played, I thought, pretty good, and he's played fairly well.
One bad one, but that's what everybody does that now.
Second fastest goalie to reach 250 wins.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I was doing a radio hit on Buffalo Radio this morning, and they asked me who's the threat to Tampa Bay in the East, and I said, well, obviously, if they have to play a Pittsburgh in the first round, that's the worst matchup. But I think the only threat in the East right now is Washington.
Yeah, they're definitely a threat.
Yes, they are. And I think whatever has held the Caps back, whether it's a psychological thing, a coaching thing or stuff, they've sort of exercised that demons. If they falter in going at least through the second round, that it'll be a different issue than things we've seen before. We won't be talking about the same issue. From a standpoint of managing Tampa Bay, like as a game, if they have to go into a 7-game series with them, I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch, not because it may necessarily be some sort of banging, crashing, crazy high event game, but tactically it could be very interesting to see how they match up as well. I think, that I hate the term, but the game inside the game.
Well, I'm going to tell you, there was a play in that game where Brooks Orpik won on a touch-up race for icing, and I was shocked. Because, Brooks, let's face it, Brooks Orpik's getting up there in age. He's had his share of injuries and such. But I'll tell you, he's still got the will and the drive. And that's something where, and I don't know who was chasing him, but whoever that was in the Flyers definitely should have overtaken him and didn't. And that's, that's a heart of a champion. And that's something that the Caps definitely showed last night. I even made a remark when it was 5-0. The game will probably end like 7-3 because I know the Flyers will come back, because they always fall behind in games and always come back, with maybe Buffalo being the exception because that didn't happen in that game. But end of the day, you like what you see out of the Capitals. I saw a very activated Nick Backstrom in that game too, where sometimes I feel like Backstrom falls back a little bit. And in this game, he wasn't. He was really pushing. Actually had some hard luck, could have got an empty net goal. He hit the side of the net. But there was a play in that game that we don't see very often, and I still think they should do it for a horrible penalty. But there was a goal that was scored that hit the camera lens.
Oh yeah,
but it looked like, we're way up in the press box. It looked like it hit the post. And it's funny. Somebody said, "Well, I didn't hear the ping," and it's like when you're way up that high, a lot of times we only once in a blue moon will hear a ping. So I really did think it hit off the post. A bunch of us did, and then probably like a minute and a half went by. Then there was a stoppage, and the ref came out to the ice, and he goes, out of 5:52, whatever, we reviewed the play, and we determined it was a goal. Said, boom, all of a sudden, Philly's down 2-0. But that's the right call. And again, I think when there's like a behind-the-play penalty, a really egregious penalty that's missed, they could do the same thing. They could say, you know what? We went back and we saw this, and guess what? Now you're in the box for 2 minutes for something that occurred, and give the time on it. It's so easy to do. And I'm only talking about something that's really egregious. And we've seen those kinds that really a guy should not get away with.
Well, one of the things that they were talking about reviewing, and then they ended up deciding not to go that way, was like for major infractions like double minors or majors for high sticking, looking at video review to see whether the severity of the penalty was equal to what actually happened, and they decided not to do that. But I mean, at a certain point, you're going to go too much towards replay and micromanaging the game. And the game will take 3.5 hours to play if you keep doing that. So
no, but I'm saying if you see somebody who goes off the ice, right, with an injury, and you haven't called a penalty,
right?
I have no problem if someone's watching the whole game the whole time and phones in and says, hey, you know what? We got to call this because that was pretty severe.
Well, the funny thing was last Monday when the Leafs played the Edmonton Oilers and Brad Malone hit Travis Dermott. Dermott came off the ice in significant pain because he had suffered some sort of shoulder injury. Malone first went to the penalty box, then left the penalty box and went to the bench thinking he had been banished from the game. And there was no penalty called. He ended up coming back to the bench, sort of like with his tail between his legs, not realizing, or just after being told, "Oh no, you weren't even penalized for." So that tells him he basically had a guilty conscience because he thought he was going to be penalized. So anyway, okay. So
I will say this: there's a question to chat room. I feel like if I just answer it now, it's better. Now, of course, I can't find. Oh, Mike asked, "What do you think Washington will do with Samsonov?" Well, about a week ago, I did interview Ross Mahoney, and they're still playing the long game with Samsonov, and that's the right thing to do because he just started to get hot maybe like a month ago in the AHL. Hope he's still got, 2 years left?
1 year.
1 year left. So Holtby's got a year left. Honestly, I could see them leaving Samsonov in the AHL for the entire year next year, or until Holtby gets traded at the deadline, if that's what they decide, or if they ride it out or whatever. But if Samsonov looks like that guy, then Holtby won't get this massive extension that he's probably wanting. If they don't see enough out of Samsonov yet, then they probably will try and extend Holtby for 3 or 4 years, and Samsonov will have to wait his turn. But I don't think they'll use him as a backup. I don't think there's a lot of – Ross didn't talk about this, but this is just me talking. I don't think there's a lot of benefit playing him as a backup when you know he's got a 1A pedigree.
Yeah, and they extended Phoenix Copley for 3 years, so
Right.
they see him as the backup.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, if he does well enough, then I could see them just saying, thank you, Braden, and we'll move on. But maybe they'd extend him a year or two. I mean, he's in his 30s. I mean, he's not going to get a 6 or 7 year deal anymore. Anyway,
no, but he might get 3 or 4. He could probably get what Ryan Miller got out of Vancouver.
Yeah, I think he could get 3 for sure.
And there are enough teams that need goaltending out there that they'll be obliging. Now, the Blues stay red hot. They beat the Anaheim Ducks 5-4. Alex Pietrangelo with a goal in the final minute of regulation for the victory. They're only 6 points behind the Jets. Do you think the Jets are worried about the Blues catching them?
Peter?
Sorry, say that again, please.
The Blues are 6 points behind the Jets. Are they worried about the?
I think they're worried about everything right now, and they should be, because they're not playing very good hockey. And we get into the whole thing of, if you're a team, you say, well, we're always looking ahead of us. We never look in the rearview mirror. But if you're driving, you need to know what's going on around you, not just what's in front of your face, because you have to understand. Because what the Blues do could mean the Jets play them in the first round, depending on where the Jets finish. And so you have to be aware of that. And if coaches, particularly Paul Maurice, talks about the season schedule, where they are, the days off, the workload, the opposition, they all think about it. They get plans in place of how they want to use work, ice time, when they should increase minutes, when they should pull them back if necessary, and then they adjust based on injuries. Why would it change about what someone else is doing if they're getting hot behind you? You should absolutely be not so much worrying about it, but understanding it and looking at it and observing it. So they should be worried, and they should be worried that the Blues are playing some really good hockey and getting some insane goaltending, because those are two things that can kill any team if they come at the right time. Yeah,
2 of those goals were scored in the last 12 seconds, and they were kind of crazy because Gibson had one of them completely lined up, and it just went high, and I forget who scored it, but it was just a great goal. I couldn't blame Gibson at all. Now, this is a game where Jordan Binnington really wasn't at his best and got bailed out by the team, but that's good. That has to happen once in a while, but it's still incredible. Binnington has literally started 20 games, and they've won 16 of them. He is now getting into the Calder conversation because he's played 22 games. He's going to go over the threshold, I believe.
Yes. It's 25. I think it's 25.
Yeah. He's got a .929 save percentage. He is working his way into Calder contention where, he wasn't even in the NHL a few months ago.
Remember, he's got to reach a certain amount of games to prevent him from being an unrestricted free agent.
I don't think that's a problem now, because
no, I think that there's still a few games left.
I know, but there's no chance he's not playing them.
Oh no, he's their starter. They're going to ride him until he drops. Okay, 2 other games. We'll save the best for last. Vegas and Calgary, a 2-1 victory for the Golden Knights. Derek England scores the winning goal in the third period. This was a little bit of a rough affair. I'm just looking at the penalty, the box score, and Matthew Tkachuk interference on Marc-Andre Fleury. Colin Miller roughing on Matthew Tkachuk. Let's just say Matthew Tkachuk, he is the Webster's dictionary definition of a shit disturber. He is that's what he does. He's immensely talented, but boy, does he love to stir the pot, Russ. He gets off on it. It's unbelievable. I mean, every game he was. And the funny thing was, they played Toronto on Monday, and Nikita Zaitsev elbowed him. And for the rest of the game, and it looked inadvertent. It didn't look like, Zaitsev's not the type of guy who usually elbows players. He caught him on the button. He knocked him down. And for the rest of the game, Tkachuk was going after Zaitsev.
Yeah, he's just great at that. Like he loves the trash talking aspect, and he can back it up with his play. Like it's a great combination. I mean, let's face it. Teams want those kinds of players. If there were 4 more Tkachuks in minor hockey, teams would be scouting them already.
Yeah. Okay. The game that I concentrated on obviously was the Canucks and the Leafs.
Yeah.
At Rogers Arena. Now,
which Rogers Arena? There's like 3 of them, right?
Well, there's Rogers Arena, there's Rogers Center. So there's Scotiabank Saddledome, Scotiabank Arena. Yeah, there's too many. So anyway, now I didn't see this because I was before the game. I was just doing a couple things, and usually I don't watch the anthems. I just get to the beginning of the game. So they had a moment of silence for Ted Lindsay, who passed away earlier this week at the age of 93. And Peter, now you saw it. What
I didn't see the pregame, but I've seen the video after.
Okay.
And basically what happened is they do the thing, little roll of what Ted Lindsay and what he said, and they asked for a moment of silence. So a moment of silence, if you're unaware, is supposed to be between 10 and 15 seconds, depending on how long you describe a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see that most of all. At about the 9-second mark, all of a sudden you hear in the background, Leafs suck. Then you hear, shut up. Then you hear, go Leafs, go.
Right. So there's only
one out of 3 who isn't guilty. And that's the person who said, shut up.
Right.
But the problem was, the problem is that someone, and it happens a lot in anthems too. Right. People will start cheering at a certain thing and certain points, and it doesn't matter, right? Like they're tired, the anthem's done. And, just finish the anthem and just shut up. Have a cheer at the end. Let's play hockey. Whatever your sport is. And I think the anthems in these things are so watered down that if you've got a few wobbly pops in you and such, you're just done. It's a huge game. It's East versus West. There's 10,000 Leafs fans in the building. You don't give a shit about Ted Lindsay or anything. Unfortunately, you should.
Right. And
you should be quiet for your 15 seconds of your short, meaningless life, you cretins. And what you should do is recognize that there are bigger things than your $240 ticket and your $12 beers that you just consumed. That matter to people in hockey and the hockey world. Ted Lindsay, whether you knew him, saw him play or anything, was one of them.
Yeah,
that's what needs to be done. And we've watered down those moments because we do far too many of them.
I'll tell you
there's a little fatigue.
Yeah, I'll tell you my feeling. You can do whatever you want during the anthem, right? If you don't feel like sitting, don't sit. If you want to stand. If you want to cheer red because you're a traveling Capitals fan, like at last night's game, go ahead. But when they do say, hey, there's a moment of silence, just give that moment of silence. It isn't that hard. And actually in Philly, even though the Caps fans were cheering for those things in the anthem, the minute they said moment of silence, everybody was silent. They showed the picture and they got on with it. And for, a place that gets a bad rap in Philly, they were fine. It was perfect.
You know what? Vancouver is basically Philly West.
Yeah, well, I was going to say
the gotten out of hand.
The worst. Sorry.
No, I was just saying it's gotten out of hand, and the fan base is kind of terrible.
Well, the worst game the worst game you could have chosen for a moment of silence would have been Leafs Canucks because the hatred is on both sides. I mean, Vancouver fans hate Toronto. They don't hate the Raptors because they don't have a basketball team. They don't hate the Blue Jays because those are nationwide teams. They hate the Leafs because, my God, they had to start the game at 6 p.m. Pacific because it was the Leafs. that East-West stupidity that goes on, and believe me, I've been at Air Canada Center in Scotiabank Arena, and they had a moment of silence for something, and somebody will yell, "Let's go Sens," or something like that, and it's one person in 19,000, and that person is a complete jackass.
Yeah.
But it's tough. It's tough to not have a few a-holes in the arena when you have 19,000 people there, and then once it starts one way, it goes the other way. So
yeah, absolutely. And I give credit to the person who said, "Shut up."
Yeah.
And you know what?
Yeah.
And and it would have been wrong if you'd even said, "Love you, Ted." Like, even if you said that, as much
I
as
don't want you to say that, right?
No, right. Even as much respect, it's a moment of silence, and
You're
that's
supposed to reflect. Like, this is decorum.
Yeah.
You're supposed to reflect
exactly
on his career and how he's great and what he's done for the game, and it's not about you.
Now,
it's not about your moment to bellow out in front of 20,000 people and
Right.
have your 2 seconds of infamy.
Now, what I will say, Russ, because you mentioned the anthems, I have a problem, especially during the playoffs, when you go to Boston, and it's happened a couple times. I remember, I think 2013 it happened, or maybe it was last year, where they booed the Canadian national anthem.
Yeah, I don't like that either.
And in a few instances in Canada, where I think it was Montreal, Boston, they booed the American. Leave the anthems alone. I mean, it's like, okay, just
to be very honest, and this may not be a popular opinion, they don't need to play anthems at games. They really don't.
They don't. And this is one of the reasons. Then we'll get off the anthems and talk about the game. Yeah. This is one of the reasons I love in Buffalo. Even though it's not a Canadian opponent, they will sing the Canadian anthem because like 20% or 25% of the season ticket base are from Southern Ontario.
Yeah.
And their anthem singer, Doug Allen, does them really well and does them quickly. It's like when you have a singer that's testing the range of their voice, and you got to sit there for 4 minutes, where basically at the end of it, you need to go to the bathroom because it's been so long.
Yeah.
I mean, it's torturous. He does a good job. He gets it done quickly. Everybody, they're not. I don't think we're there to listen to the anthem. We're there to watch the game.
True. So anyway. Something about the game, Mike. I want to get your opinion. Josh Leivo scored a goal. Your thoughts? He has 13 goals.
Well, of course, whenever it's an ex-Leaf, they're going to score against the Leafs. That's
every team says that. Every fan base says that about every player from every.
Maybe they do, but it's
true though.
I'm waiting for, if they played Winnipeg and Par Lindholm had 1 goal in 60 games, the Frigger would score a hat trick against.
Okay, but let me ask you this: is there a spot on the Leafs currently that Josh Leivo could be filling? But instead, he's not. He's with the Canucks.
Okay, and let's put it in context. Josh Leivo was traded when they signed William Nylander because Kyle Dubas promised Leivo that if he was going to be put in the same position he was last year, which was the healthy scratch the entire year, that he would move him. Right. He made a promise to him, and Dubas kept the promise, and they traded him for Michael Carcone. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Right. And he's had success in Vancouver. I lay the blame at that in terms of not utilizing Leivo as a player. And believe me, a couple years ago when he played a certain amount of games, he had like 10 points in 13 games.
Yeah.
Everybody knew he was a decent player and that he should have been given out an opportunity. But the problem is that Mike Babcock didn't see him as a fourth liner. He didn't fit his definition. He played better on the fourth line this year, and they could have kept him if they would have sent Martin Marincin or somebody who's terrible down to the minors. But they kept Marincin because they needed a depth defenseman, and Leivo wasn't going to play once Nylander got back. So they kept their promise. But in the end, he was a good player that they got rid of for a minor leaguer who I don't know if will ever play in the NHL. And that's, when you're a good team, you lose players that could be playing on other teams. I don't think it's a good practice. I think you either need to get more for them or you make space to have them play.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the Leafs go up 2-0 in the second period on goals from Hainsey and Morgan Riley. They, after 2 periods, by leading by, I think, 2 or more goals, they were 32-0. And they give up the lead in, I think, the first 5 minutes of the third period. And then Alex Edler scores in overtime for the 3-2 victory. Now, Mike Babcock said something after the game which immediately smacked of, comments being, at least in my estimation, being critical of the general manager. Now, last night he played Nick Patan at center between Tyler Ennis and Trevor Moore. All of them are smaller players, skilled players. He benched the almighty Freddie Gauthier. And after the game, Babcock basically said the fourth line, I couldn't use them as much in the defensive zone. You know what I mean? Everybody loves players. That's great, but you've got to be able to use lines, and everyone's got to have a role, and someone's got a penalty kill, and someone's got to be able to take faceoffs. I didn't think I gave our team with that lineup as good of an opportunity as I might have wanted. Okay, so at the deadline, Kyle Dubas doesn't add a rough and tumble, smash mouth, sandpaper veteran forward. He adds Nick Patan. He doesn't add any defenseman, and this is what I'll be critical, and I've been critical of.
No, and I think that's fair with the defenseman. I was critical yesterday too on radio.
Yeah, I mean, and to put it into context, you can't plan for Travis Dermott getting hurt. He got hurt after the deadline. Right. Gardner had back problems. Apparently, they say they found out he had a separate injury, but he wasn't playing on Monday, so they knew there was an injury. So they knew something was wrong. Callie Rosen and Andreas Borgman, arguably the first two guys they would call up from the minors, they were both injured. One had a foot injury, the other one had a concussion. So that left them with Martin Marincin as the first call up, and they didn't acquire a depth defenseman at the deadline. And Peter, Nathan Beaulieu for a 6th round pick for Winnipeg, Michael Del Zotto for a 6th round pick for St. Louis. They're not perfect, but at least they're there.
Yeah. And actually, Beaulieu is becoming someone Jets fans are a little more intrigued about with this play. And I think given the structure of the Jets forwards and stuff, he's fitting in probably better than people thought.
Right.
To your point, I don't see why that would be any different for the Leafs, given the quality of forwards they have, the coaching, and the need to have some bodies on defense.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any difference in scenario that why you couldn't have picked up. Well, and you more of a right handy, but picked up a Del Zotto, right, and at least manages minutes so that he wasn't a liability from too much minutes, and he was out on the right situations.
And I can be completely off base here, but I mean, the only thing I can think of is you added a guy that Babcock utilized as a penalty killer in Lindholm, and they traded a guy who's a skilled water bug in Patan, who can play wing or center, but I think he's more of an analytics, more of a Dubas guy than Lindholm was, even though Dubas signed Lindholm as a free agent in the offseason. By not adding a defenseman, is he basically sending the signal to Babcock? How about you use Justin Hall, who you've used 2 games all year, and instead, what he's doing is he's doing a rotation between Martin Marincin, Igor Ozaganov, and Hall. Hall's played 2 games, and of course, one of the first things that Babcock said in his post-game remarks is, "Well, Ozaganov is back in," so he's yanking Hall and putting in Ozaganov. If this was an attempt by Dubas to manage the roster by basically doing what Billy Beane did in Moneyball and trading Carlos Pena and saying, okay, you've got to play the guys I give you now, and this is his response, then this is detrimental to the Leafs in terms of what their goal is.
Mike, okay, I know where you're going with this, and it's certainly noise within the Leafs fan community for sure. There's a lot of questioning of Babcock. There's a lot of understanding. And I'll use your reference from Moneyball and stuff. There is no way Brendan Shanahan let Kyle Dubas have the keys to the car without Dad Lou there, without understanding that those two were closer together on the page than they were. And I mean, Dubas and Babcock on the page than they were further apart. There's no way. Like, I like how it plays into the theory, but Brendan Shanahan, after what he's gone to undo everything that was a mess with the Leafs,
right,
to bring in the right people, to take calculated risks between Dubas and Hunter, to all these different things, there's no way that he will have empowered a coach such as Babcock with his salary and contract to only set up to have be loggerheads with the GM. I just don't believe it's happened. What I believe is that Babcock has an understanding of why it is, and that's why he's sort of brazen with how he discusses things.
yeah,
And I think it can be taken the other way. And I'm not saying you're wrong that he's not saying these things for a reason, but
right.
he's stating them as fact as he sees it. That's the way it is, and he knows he's not being challenged by the GM because they understand why they're in this situation.
Yeah,
I think the fans have every right to say, why are we in this situation? Babcock saying, I'm in this situation. I know why we're here. This is how I'm going to manage it and how I'm going to speak about it.
and Russ,
that's two different things, right?
yeah, and Russ, this is the concern. Yesterday, the little micromanaging here, but bear with me. They played Muzzin, Zaitsev, Riley, and Hainsey 23 to 24 minutes and played the bottom pairing of Marinson and Hall less than 13. And for most of the game, he split up the bottom pair and put one veteran with one of those guys. Mm-hmm. And both times he did that, it resulted in goals for Vancouver on the Leivo goal and on the Louis Eriksson goal. Now, the thing I look at overriding all that is it was a okay game for Freddie Anderson. It was not a great game, and the game winner smelled a little bit, the Edler goal. Yeah. You know, he's on pace right now for 61 or 62 games, and Babcock said after the game, well, we're going to, he threw out the number 56 games, which means that they would split Anderson and Garrett Sparks and the last 15 games, which I don't think there's a chance in hell of that happening, because if they do that, they basically have given up on second place, and I can't see them giving up on home ice advantage when they're 2 points behind the Bruins. But all these mixed signals, I mean, I don't know what is being accomplished by him coming out and saying the stuff that he says in the post-game remarks.
Yeah, look, right now Babcock is trying to position himself in a place of power in that organization. And during this season, Kyle Dubas can't really do anything about it. Like, his work is done. He can't really counter with anything. He can't really do anything. So Babcock's in charge of the minutes. He's in charge of everything. He'll be in charge of most of the blame if they don't go far either. And I think that's really where it lies right now. In the offseason, they're going to have a little discussion, I'm sure, because Babcock's going to want to go a certain direction with the team. Dubas is going to want to go in a certain direction, and they're going to have to come to some sort of agreement. The interesting thing is I never hear Babcock mention Dubas. I just don't.
Yeah, very, very rarely. And when he does, it's like, oh, we're on the same page. And, Kyle and I, like, we're, our goals are the same, whatever. I mean, I think it's, me being the cynic that I am, I believe it's lip service. I believe behind the scenes, it's not as rosy and not as.
And that's what I'm getting at. I think there's probably a little something there that they're going to have to iron out in the offseason.
Okay.
All right. I do have a situation I want to bring up.
Sure. Go ahead.
Vitaly Kravtsov situation. The Rangers are trying to bring him over, but there's a whole host of things. And actually, Larry Brooks does a nice job of pointing him out in an article on the Post a couple of days ago. Like, they want to get a look-see at him now. It looks like his team was a Tractor
got eliminated.
Is willing to do it. And I have an article up on Sportsology that basically Kravtsov told somebody, and I got to use the information, that was his first goal, was to play in the playoffs for Tractor. So now that that's over, Tractor's being nice and saying, hey, if you want to go over and play with the Rangers, we're not going to stand in your way. That's essentially what they've said. But the problems is there's implications if the Rangers bring him over and play him with the big club, because, again, with Seattle expansion and everything else, that sort of starts the clock on that for him having to be a protected player. And then all of a sudden, now you've got a lot of young guys, and who are you going to protect? Even though you're a couple of years looking down the road, this could affect it. Now, Larry had an idea. that you could bring him over for an ATO and look at him in Hartford, and that's probably the best way to do it.
Right.
But that's only if the guy wants to do it.
Right.
May not want to do that.
They could sign him to the 3-year entry level, effective starting next year, and then sign him to the ATO so he could finish out with. I mean, I don't know if Hartford's in the playoff race for the Calder Cup playoffs.
I think they are, but I'll look it up.
Yeah, but I mean, even if they're not, I mean, they've got about 3-4 weeks, I think, at least left in the AHL season, so he could get 7 or 8 games, and it wouldn't start the clock.
He's willing to do that, and that's what we're going to find out here. So I don't ever put like anything as a guarantee that he's guaranteed to come over just because the team over there says, "Hey, you can go over." It's a lot more complicated than that.
Peter, is there any talk about? I mean, because Vesalainen went over to the KHL. And he signed his ELC, but he went over to the KHL to play. Now I think he's with Jokerit. If Jokerit gets eliminated, is there any talk about him coming back for the playoffs?
At this point, no. There's no talk, and I haven't heard any. And it's actually eerily silent when it comes to the Jets that way.
Okay. Well, I will say this: the reason that he did go to Jokerit was because it was in his contract that he could develop over in Europe.
Right,
so,
he has a European return clause. Yeah.
Now, when the development is over, like for the year, it's possible they may recall him and use him that way because he is doing well there. He has a goal in the playoffs. Like, he wouldn't be the worst guy to bring over, but they don't really. I don't believe they really want to rush him, and so that's going to be the struggle. Do you really want to throw him in the sauce when you're getting into the important games in the playoffs? And I think they may stray away from doing that, to be honest.
Right. They'll probably opt to throw Matt Hendricks in rather than call back Vesalainen and do that. Now, some interesting talk in Buffalo here about Skinner. We'll end with this and maybe take a couple questions from the chat. Elliot Friedman reported that the difference right now with the Sabres and Skinner is term. They can offer him the 8-year deal. The Sabres, he's only 26, but he's an old 26 because he's played since he was 18 years old. The Sabres want to pay him less term, which I think is dumb because they can spread out the cap hit longer and, maybe front load it, maybe load it with signing bonus to get it to be more palatable for an AAV. But they don't want to go 8 years. And then there's another report that said that they're between $750,000 to $1 million apart, and that's per year on a long-term deal. So, Russ, you look at the Sabres; they're in the bottom third in offense. They're in the bottom third in defense. Their goaltending is average. Their defense is, other than Dahlin and maybe Ristolainen, is okay at best. They've got 4 or 5 guys in double figures in goals. There are multiple problems that Botterill has to solve in the summer, and Skinner's not one of them. Just pay him the money, but I don't know.
It's easy for us to say that. We don't know how negotiations are going, and what cap implications are there, and bonus structure, and money up front, and all those other things. Right. So we know that's the biggest thing. Lucky for them, they have Pekka Luukkonen and they have Evan Fitzpatrick. So they do have goalies of the future. And Pekka Luukkonen's probably the further along, even though I think he's further along. I think he's a couple years away. So they have to get through the next couple seasons with either what they've got or go out and get yet another guy, like if they want to get a Varlamov or somebody like that for a couple-year deal, if somebody's willing to sign that. But that's sort of where they're at. They're getting close. The team is much closer than it was a couple of years ago. There's still open spots, though. There's still dead spots in the lineup, I call it, on defense, on bottom 6. You might have to move a Gergensons. I just think because he was rushed, he never turned into the player they hoped he'd be.
Yeah, he's only been good under Ted Nolan. Maybe it's a lot.
So maybe you move him, and maybe, that's the best thing you could do for him. There's still going to be some things they have to do, but Skinner's number one.
Peter, that free agent year when Lucic and Backus and Louis Eriksson, the anchor around the Sabres is Kyle Oposo. And part of it is health reasons, and he's had concussion problems. He's only got 10 goals this year. He's been in and out of the lineup. That signing is almost as big a disaster for them as Eriksson and Lucic, and to a lesser extent Backes. They've all been bad, but he's got 4 more years on that contract. I don't know if he's ever going to be able to rise to the occasion to be able to make that contract worth it.
I don't know. That's just a tough one, Mike. And it's funny that year you just listed the 3 of them. Is there more that year? I mean,
there are more, but those were the bad ones off the. Well, it wasn't. Wait, it wasn't
the danger of getting sucked in to believing something you want to believe because it fits your need, not because the actual player is what you got to know what the player is, so that you don't get caught in this situation. And there's 3 teams that all have a deal that they would do anything to get out of, and they've got no hope.
Well,
it's tough. I mean, maybe something ignites that it brings a little value out of it, but it's time. Like, that's all you have to. That's the only remedy for this is time.
Yeah, and I don't know if Kyle Oposo is going to get better with time. I mean, maybe,
no, actually, I do. I think
maybe he gets healthier, Russ. I mean, but right now, I mean, he took that punch on the button from Anthony DeAngelo. He was out for a few weeks. They said it wasn't serious, but we know how concussions are and how, as you have more of them, the symptoms are worse, and it just builds and builds on them. This is a guy. I mean, his success was as a winger with John Tavares.
And that's putting up points. I am not willing to give up on Kyle Okposo. I've watched him play. I still think there's something there. I still think he's recovering from the illness last year and now this. I think if he gets it right next year, you still could look at 40, 45 points.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be heartless here. I'm just saying, I think they envisioned more out of him when they signed him, and they haven't gotten even close to what they thought they were going to get. Now, this is where they're at with them, I'll go through the standings quickly here, and then we'll take some questions and end the show. Right now, the division race is Tampa, Boston, Toronto. Boston is up by 2 points over the Leafs. In the Metro, Washington is now pulled ahead of the Islanders. Islanders at 83, Washington 85, Carolina at 79. The 2 wildcard teams are at 79 and 79, Pittsburgh and Montreal, and Columbus is at 77. And I believe they play, and get this, Russ, they play Pittsburgh tonight, I believe. I'm just double checking here. Yes, Blue Jackets at Penguins. Right, and the report is that Sergei Bobrovsky is not one of the 2 goaltenders that will be on the bench tonight. It would be Korpisalo or Keith Kincaid starting, and Bobrovsky, either he's injured or he's getting a complete day of rest.
Yeah, like a maintenance day. You know what? I would put Kincaid in there. I would, because right now, let's see what they've got in Keith Kincaid. Maybe he rises to the occasion, because he'll realize in his head he's not going to get that many opportunities. He could steal a start here, and he can maybe steal another start and another start. So you know what? If I'm Kincaid, I think they should try Kincaid. Korpisalo, they already know what they have in him.
Yeah. Other games tonight. We'll just go. We'll take questions tomorrow.
Yes.
Panthers, Bruins. Bruins again have won or earned a point in 17 straight games. So I've not lost in regulation since January 19th. They play the Panthers. I favor the Bruins on that one. Islanders play the Senators. They need to win that game to pull even with the Caps. Rangers and Red Wings with no playoff implications. The Wild have a tough match against Tampa Bay.
That's a tough one.
That's a very tough one. Now in the West, by the way, it's 10 teams in the race, and Colorado and Arizona are within 4 points of the wild card. I still can't understand how Arizona is doing it, but they play the Flames tonight, and the Flames have been struggling lately. So you're gonna have a Flames team that's going to be
a tough matchup for Arizona, though.
Yeah, it is very, very tough. If they win this one, then I guess maybe I'll start to be a little bit of a believer. But right now, I don't understand how they're sticking around. Colorado Dallas is a big matchup with playoff implications for those 2 teams. The Blues face the Kings, and the Canadians face the San Jose Sharks.
The one thing I'll say about Minnesota, if on them, you got to get a point. Just get a point tonight.
Yeah, if you can get a point out of Tampa, that's considered a victory because they're a juggernaut. Okay, good show, guys. We will be back tomorrow for another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Peter Tessier, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.